What's up, viewers, subscribers, and agents alike? It's your boy Light Luciferian Prince coming at y'all once again. This month is the anniversary of what they have called notoriously the Tulsa race riots. However, that title is very misleading. That title is quote unquote a brand to basically make it seem as if it were two groups or ethnic groups going back and forth between each other, but no, people. This was a carefully and strategically designed military operation designed to destroy the economic growth and development of Tulsa, Oklahoma, also known as, quote unquote, the destruction of Black Wall Street. So whenever you hear these people nowadays talk about this ideology of critical race theory, which we'll get to later on in this video, just know that this notion that is placed upon the idea of critical race theory is nothing more than them trying to rebrand history. Now, this happened 100 years ago this month. See, there was a senatorial committee where this is the centennial of the particular event. And there's only, according to records, two people who testified before Congress, I believe yesterday, if not mistaken, who are surviving victims of that massacre. And they give in very lucid detail before Congress the events that took place. But you have to also understand, people, this is the reason why they don't want your children or future generations knowing about the atrocities of this country. Because that has to fit into the New World Order narrative. They have to sweep all of the atrocities under the rug to try to make it seem as if this is a perfect place. It's not. And it is our job as the watchdogs of history, for those people who want accurate history taught, to actually embellish upon these topics. But before I proceed, please, people, if you're watching this around children, please remove your young ones from the space and vicinity, because my videos are not for children. But I will tell you that the way that these things are moving in this country is complete and utter bullshit. The reason why they don't want critical race theory taught in schools is because they don't want future generations knowing about what this country is based on. This country is based on lies, it is based on murder, it is based on rapine, it is based on all the negative elements that a society could ever be constructed upon. But the crazy part is they want to try to convince your children, your forebears, that it works. See, that's the only way this country can last, because that's what it was built upon. But the significant part of history they don't tell you about is that the people of Tulsa, the inhabitants of Tulsa, were not, quote unquote, former slaves. They were actual landowners and they were oil barons. That's a fundamental fact. They had the resources to basically let their community thrive. Not to mention, in the economy of Tulsa yesteryear, the dollar, before it left the community, stayed in the community up to 16 times per each proprietor. So the money continued to, accrue value amongst the community, and therefore it was allowing other people of color to have opportunities that your quote unquote government will never fucking give you. Okay? That's a fundamental fact. However, because people are often misled and think that the government owns everything, remember one thing before you proceed with life. They don't have shit. Okay? They get everything that they get off of you through taxation and other means. Fines, fees, penalties, and floating you liens in debt in the form of registry and benefits. This government don't have a motherfucking thing, people. And they don't want you to have shit. Because these people had one thing that they've gone all over the globe to obtain. That's oil. Okay? So why do we have to go all the way overseas when we can steal it from here? America is, quote unquote, an oil-rich country. However, your history books have taught you, or whether they've taught you at all, you've been misled to make it seem as if other countries produce oil. You have been sadly mistaken. Now, to prove to you how rich it is, let's go back to the quote unquote no good ass Obama administration, where this individual let the pipeline flow for, don't quote me, I guarantee it was over what, damn near close to half a year before they did anything about it and didn't break a sweat. Doesn't that tell you something? Oh, here's a modern day effect. When the colonial pipeline, gotta love that word colonial, when the colonial pipeline basically was hacked, they paid a $4.4 million ransom, yada, yada, yada. We already know what's going on, whatever. And that threw people into a shock. But a lot of people didn't even know that pipeline existed to the extent that it did, all the way from the Midwest up until Linden, New Jersey, where it ends. That's a lot of motherfucking infrastructure that you never knew about. Now, as time goes on, you'll understand the valuable importance of a natural resource, which is why these people were killed. I know we heard the narrative. A black man and a white girl was in the elevator. She accused him of rape, yada, yada, yada. Let me tell you something about Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you go through the census records, you can have access to these records. This was 100% indigenous people. It wasn't black, because black is a name that is branded because it makes you have to understand the connotation of black. And I'm going to do that in my next video to give liberality to a lot of people's consciousness about using that word, because it's negative. And I'm going to say, and it's negative in its strict English sense, and it's negative definitely in its legal sense. And oftentimes you're looked at negatively more in the light of law than anything. That's why I'm going to do it in my next video, to do a service to people who keep using that fucking word. But anyway, these were the indigenous people of that region. What you have to understand is that the reason why they want these theories taught in school, remember, they try to say theory. Theory is something that cannot be proven by fact. So yes, they can rebrand it. They can stylize it. They can translate it however they want. They can keep the sheep in the pen. You have to understand that in this age of information, you are not supposed to allow no fucking governmental entity to dictate to you what your future generation should learn. That is your responsibility. Your responsibility is to teach your future generation what they should know. Not sitting here waiting on a man, a Caucasoid, to stroke a pen across a piece of paper and dictate your future. We've seen that far too long. That's bullshit. You need to get into your critical historical references and stop depending on these people to teach you. We had to basically bring ourselves into emancipation mentally because we've been bombarded with that bullshit our whole life. You have to realize that an education from public school never prepares you for the actualities of real life. They keep you lackadaisically and quote unquote basically passive into a false sense of reality the whole time while you're growing into a stage of maturity, but never at the same time mentally growing into maturity. And that way, while you're still sitting there being a baby mentally, they can go ahead and revise your history, and you can regurgitate that bullshit back to other parents who heard the same thing. McGraw-McGill, whatever the fuck the name of their goddamn publishing company is, and all of those were funded in the early 19th century, 20th century, mid-19th century to the 20th century, by quote unquote the industrialists of that time. We all know the names. I don't need to go over them. Those who've done the research, know exactly what I'm talking about. The Carnegies and so forth and so on. We know that. But why people find this shit so hard to understand is because these people have placed so much money into basically streamlining education to their narrative. See, you have to understand psychologically, what you take in is what you put out. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people have these regurgitative concepts, and they often spew things they have done no research on, and they think that fundamentally it's the truth. No, it's not. It's a secondhand belief. It's a secondhand concept, and it's something based upon someone else's structure and how they want you to think. A lot of people might disagree, but let me tell you something. In order for you to ever come to a higher knowledge, you have to first become a fucking fool and believe that everything you've ever been taught has been a fucking lie. But let's go further. Let's talk about the quote-unquote indigenous Wall Street. In much of the country, in years following World War I, saw a spike in racial tensions, including the resurgence of the white supremacist group, Ku Klux Klan, which still exists to this day in this country. Numerous lynchings and other acts of racially motivated violence, as well as efforts by African Americans to prevent such attacks on their community, as well as efforts by African Americans, that's a legal moniker as well, to prevent such attacks on their communities. By 1921, fueled by oil money, Tulsa was a growing, prosperous city with a population of more than 100,000 people. So 100,000 people who have access to a natural resource that provides and sustains for their own community is what? You would think the first word comes to your mind is indestructible. No, they were economically stable. See, there wasn't no welfare, there were no drugs, no prostitution, no alcohol, no quote-unquote prison industrial complex. None of those things existed. Now, I will say that amongst every populace of people, you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 knuckleheads amongst every population. But I'm probably sure that it was never to the extent that America, quote-unquote, is today. As far as this bullshit-ass state of affairs we exist in. But crime rates were high. And vigilante justice of all kinds wasn't uncommon. Until I read that in a history book, I will never believe what an internet narrative says. First off, again, I've done thorough research on this, and I'm just reading this as a reference, not as the truth. This is a reference just to give you a frame of mind, because you have to realize most sources on the internet and most sources out there publicly are often slanted with the objective of the author to basically distort the mind of the reader. Until you understand what vigilante justice is, that means that a person takes the matters into their own hand. So when shit got out of hand, they took it into their own hands. They didn't pick up a phone and call goddamn the Gestapo to basically turn around and goddamn try to aid and assist you. Not like today. They took it into their own hands. So the word vigilante is not bad if you understand that it means vigilant and watchful in its original context. And it means that if somebody was out of line, you took care of it yourself, which is what you're basically supposed to be doing today. The Panthers tried it, but COINTELPRO dismantled their vigilante justice because they were keeping the motherfucking system out of their communities, out of their affairs, like these people did. Okay, follow me. Tulsa was also a highly segregated city. Highly, which means that they had no involvement with outside affairs or outsiders, which is one of the reasons why integration was one of the biggest problems and still is one of the biggest problems for us today in this country. Now, I know a lot of people might feel different about that because they grew up with the narrative that we're all supposed to get along. We're all supposed to get along. We're supposed to forgive and love and all that bullshit. But this is a historical segment that they want to try to totally eradicate from history to prove to you that segregation of any kind when it comes to commercial behavior is the worst shit for the survival of any type of particular people. Let's go further. Most of the city's 10,000 black residents, see how just 10,000, lived in a neighborhood called Greenwood, which included a thriving business district, sometimes referred to as the Black Wall Street. That was the capital hub. But there were 90,000 more people. Notice what it said, highly segregated. So in other words, they had no outside involvement. However, on May 30th, 1921, here's that bullshit narrative. A young black teenager named Dick Rowland entered the elevator at the Drexel Building, an office building on South Main Street. At some point after that, the young white elevator operator, Sarah Page, screamed. Rowland fled the scene. The police were called, and the next morning they arrested Rowland. Now, here's how you take a micro situation and turn it into a macro situation. If you caught the person, what the fuck? Okay, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, census statistics say accurately 100,000. It is probably never accurate because we're never going to get historical accurate records on that because they're trying to wipe this away at every angle. So let's just be nice to them. 100,000. So that means that you caught one. So that's 999,000 other people who had shit to do with it. So you caught the person. In the discussion, right? No. Let me show you how sabotage totally worked and espionage totally worked in this scenario. At some point after that, they arrested Rowland, like I said before. By that time, rumors of what supposedly happened on the elevator had circulated through the city's white community. But remember, these were the outskirts. They were never the inclusion. They were always the exclusion. Remember that. A front page story of Tulsa Tribune that afternoon, same day, reported that police had arrested Rowland for sexually assaulting Page. Shit. As evening fell, same day, same fucking day, an angry white mob was gathering outside the courthouse demanding the sheriff hand over Rowland. Sheriff Willett McCullough refused, and his men barricaded the top floor to protect the black teenager. Right? Around 9 p.m., a group of about 25 armed black men, including many World War I veterans, went to the courthouse to offer help guarding Roland. After the sheriff turned them away, some of the white mob tried unsuccessfully to break into the National Guard armory nearby. Let me show you how espionage played into this. The only people who can have access to a National Guard armory are who? People who were associated with military. Unsuccessfully means that it was a decline on the behalf of those people because they didn't want to directly attach themselves to the actual historical event that took place directly. That doesn't mean they didn't have involvement, and I'm going to show you further that they did. Here we go. With rumors still flying of a possible lynching. Possible. So in other words, you had a bunch of angry, quote unquote, disenfranchised, poor ass, Caucasoids walking around. We're going to hang that Niagara, walking around, stoking the flames of a conflict that was totally based upon sabotage of a community. If the man was in jail, what does the whole community have to do with anything? See, nothing happens by accident in this fucking country. I don't give a fuck what history books tell you, what CNN tell you, what fucking the History Channel tells you, which is totally based upon unfactual, baseless bullshit. We're talking about facts here. You see what I'm saying? So it's important to stay in touch with the reality of your history or the history of this country because it's never going to fucking change. And people have this lackadaisical idea that it is, and that's bullshit. Let's go further. Around 75 black men returned to the courthouse shortly after 10 p.m., an hour later. So the numbers increased by 50 men. So they're like, look, these motherfuckers, they want smoke, we want smoke. So they were met by 1,500 white men, some of whom also carried weapons, but they never give a number. They said some. Here go Greenwood. After shots were fired and chaos broke out, never said by which side. But we already know who the instigator and the agitator was. The outnumbered group of black men retreated to Greenwood. You see what I'm saying? So we know where the shots are fired from. Context clues. It ain't hard to tell. Over the next several hours, a group of white Tulsans outside of Greenwood, some of whom were deputized by the same goddamn sheriff who was trying to actually sit here and keep it from going on. So you got to watch out for a lot of these motherfuckers in these certain counties and places in these states who sit here and talk about their constitutionalists and their patriots. Patriotism is a modern day sign of racism. I don't give a fuck what no one says. It's allegiance to the beast. You see what I'm saying? So when people try to tell you, I fight for my country, I stand for my country, and we don't, we're instantly, based upon the historical relevance of who we are in this country, are diametrically opposed to their ideology. Simple as that. They see the country as being a good because they benefited off of the oppression of the country perpetuating its agenda amongst the people. See, they see it as themselves not being affected by the same system, but at the same token, they try to look down on other people. You see what I'm saying? They try to look down on other people because they see the wrongs happening to them, but it's never hitting their front door. See, that's the whole myth of white supremacy. There ain't no fucking white supremacy because it's a lot of 62.4% of people who are on welfare are poor white single mothers. However, 11.3% of recipients are people of color or other people. See what I'm saying? But they want to try to perpetuate it as if we make up the majority of people who are totally incapable of being economically stable. Get the fuck out of here. But anyway, that's just the statistics. That's not my bias. That's facts. So, they were also given weapons by city officials. Here's the espionage. Committed numerous acts of violence against black people. Some of those things which are not documented, but we already know what took place. You see what I'm saying? Including shooting of an unarmed man in the movie theater. So that meant that they totally just went and invaded any place that they felt was necessary for them to particularly go ahead and try to, quote unquote, do as they please. The false belief that a large-scale insurrection amongst the melanated Tulsans was underway. I said melanated. I'm sick of that word black. Including reinforcement from nearby towns and cities with large African-American population fueled the growing hysteria. Yeah, motherfucker, we need backup. You feel what I'm saying? We thought it was peaceful, but shit, we got caught slipping. So here comes the brigade. As dawn broke, so let's see. 9 p.m., 10 p.m. This shit went all the way on through the morning till June 1st. Damn, that was an all-night motherfucking battle. You know, which has never been recorded except for the pictures taken in the aftermath. See, what you get in history books are the pictures taken in the aftermath. But the universe provided 2 living witnesses to give you a micro scale of what took place. 2 living witnesses from that time period that actually testified before Congress about what took place. Watch it. You know, it's a first-hand account. Now, some people will try to detract from them. Well, they're 100 some odd years old and their memory is failing. No, people. No, people. That's just trying to discredit from the account of what took place. In the universe today, as us living 100 years from that time, have 2 witnesses, 2 that went before Congress to actually say what took place. And that's just a micro scale. That's just what they saw. You see what I'm saying? The destruction was a lot larger because that city is a drug-infested, crime-ridden individual entity to this day. It never flourished after that. But I'm talking about today. But I'll get to something later. I'm not going to get before myself. Here we go. As dawn broke, June 1st, thousands of white citizens poured into Greenwood District, looting and burning homes and businesses over an area of 35 city blocks. Firefighters who arrived to help put out the fires later testified that the rioters, who were deputized and weaponized individuals of city officials, had threatened them with guns and forced them to leave. Let it burn. According to a later estimate, some of the 1,256 houses were burned. 215 others were looted but not torched, which means they stole shit, which probably was records, deeds, so forth and so on. Things that they basically claim to this day that they are actual possessors of because they killed the original possessor of the documentation. That's their nature. 2 newspapers, a school, a library, a hospital, churches, hotels, stores, and many other melanated-owned businesses were among the buildings destroyed or damaged by fire, or else. They don't talk about the bombs that were actually dropped from military airplanes either. But you'll see those actually in the photos because these are the photos taken of the aftermath. By the end of the National Guard arrived, and Governor J.B.A. Robertson had declared martial law shortly before noon. Not before. This was the next day. So it was declared martial law before noon the next day. Not while all this shit was going on before. The next day, when it's all over with. The riot had effectively ended. I bet it fucking did. When you came and did your dirt. Through guardsmen helped put out fire, they also imprisoned many Tulsans. And by June 2nd, some 6,000 people were under armed guard at the local fairgrounds. So they said 10,000 people reside in the Greenwood District that was melanated. Over the better part of 100,000, that meant that 4,000 people lost their life. And they'll tell you that 125, according to the whole revised history, 125, 130, 140 lost their life. That's bullshit. Thousands perished. Thousands. In the hours of the Tulsa race massacre, all charges against Dick Rowland were dropped. Let that sink in. All charges. The man accused of the offense was acquitted. The police concluded that Rowland had most likely stumbled into Paige or stepped on her foot. Kept safely under guard in jail during the riot. He left Tulsa the next morning and reportedly never returned. The Oklahoma Bureau of Vital Statistics officially recorded 36 dead. You heard my numbers before. A 2001 state commission examination of events was able to confirm 36 dead, 26 black and 10 white. However, historians estimate the death toll may be as high as 300. I won't buy it, people. I won't. Even by low estimates, the Tulsa Race Massacre stood as one of the deadliest riots in U.S. history, behind the New York draft riots of 1863, which killed at least 119 people. In the years to come, as melanated Tulsans worked to rebuild their ruined homes and businesses, segregation in the city only increased. And Oklahoma's newly established branch of the KKK grew in strength. I wonder fucking why. You decimated the population. You eradicated the ability for them to economically advance. You totally made a false flag based upon a narrative of a false pretense. Purportedly, the man who was accused of it never returned. Wonder if he even existed anyway. But for so many people don't understand, in order for any group to take over, as this fucking country has did, it had to totally wipe out the indigenous self-sufficient population. Do y'all understand the reason why they don't want your children learning about this significant truth about this country? You have to realize you've been snowballed by the educational system and indifferences because these motherfuckers who write your history want you to believe that it was as atrocious as what took place. Loss of human life, whatever. We as people who are melanated, who are compassionate, know that it's wrong to morally kill people. They don't give a fuck. So at every angle, they will try to sit here and cover their bullshit. They do it all the time. I don't give a fuck who agrees or disagrees with me because the only way you're going to disagree with what I'm saying is if you're on the side of the enemy. The enemy is the fucking thief, the destroyer, and the murderer. If you're on that side, fuck you. You feel what I'm saying? Straight up. You have to understand that thousands of people who are well-doing, well-meaning people lost their life because of jealousy, of economic jealousy. I hate when I hear people of color say this dumbass shit. Oh, well, what are we going to do? Remember what happened in history? You know what these people had? They still armed themselves. They had arms. It's just that they were outnumbered. The more people you get on board, the more people you get on accord, the more people you have with the same mentality, it can work to this day today to the same extent. But people don't believe that. What is they going to do? I told you, don't worry about what the fuck somebody else going to do. Prepare yourself. Arm yourself. Because the government assisted in this shit. They helped. They dropped bombs from airplanes on this shit. Those people who know about the movement in the 80s, you know what I'm saying is true. What was it? Princeton University, if I'm mistaken? Might not have been Princeton University, whatever. They took the bones of the children who were actually bombed in the movement back in the 80s. They took the bones and studied them. Families didn't find out for years later. Then when they actually wanted to actually bury those children, we can't find the bones. Y'all better understand who the fuck y'all live amongst. Serious. If you don't, you are doomed to repeat this same history. That's why they signed all these bills and all this legislation to wipe it out of school. It's sort of like all that bullshit that you have on your drive on your computer. When it gets too clogged up, the machine starts running a little bit slow, you wipe it clean. But you keep the most important documents or the most important bits of information that you know relevant to the survival of that motherfucking machine. What makes you think that this system is any different? You know what I'm saying? See, this country a heavy burden weighs on this country. And the sad part about a lot of people that's melanated, y'all sit here and try to partake in that burden when you don't got shit to do with it. All you motherfuckers out here talking about Palestine. I'm riding with Palestine. Palestine ain't riding for your ass over here. They not riding for you. You didn't even know about Palestine until the media put it in your fucking face. You got your own war, your own battle to deal with over here. For Palestine, pray for Palestine. Man, fuck that shit. That shit been going on for over 60 some odd years, way before a lot of people who sit here putting that on their social media was even born, before their parents was even born. Wake up, man. Fight your own battle. Anyway, the Tulsa Tribune removed the front page story of May 31st that sparked the chaos from its bound volumes. If you get a front page of that or a copy, you are a valuable possessor of a piece of history that has otherwise been swept under the rug. And scholars later discovered that police and state militia archives about the riot were missing as well. If this happened 100 years ago and those articles are missing, and it's 100 years ago, and they want to try to instruct people to not teach critical race theory, trust me, there will be a lot more missing. As a result, until recently, the Tulsa Race Massacre was rarely mentioned in history books. Until recent. Taught in schools or even talked about. Let's talk about it. Mr. Kevin Stent, the governor of Oklahoma, was removed from the actual Centennial Committee in Congress because he signed Bill 1775 for this theory to be removed from the school system. Y'all think this shit is a coincidence. It's not. They don't want you knowing the real history of who these beasts are. But y'all yet still understand this plight and still go throw your children, your progeny, into their fucking indoctrination schools. Scholars begin to delve deeper into the story of the riot in the 1970s. After its 50th anniversary passed, in 1996, on the church's 75th riot anniversary, a service was held at Mount Zion Baptist Church, which rioters had burned to the ground, and a memorial was placed in front of the Greenwood Cultural Center. Now, they have a Tulsa Race Riot Commission established, renamed. Look into that. You can look up all the sources. Do your research, people. It is what it is. You need to understand that daily you live amongst the fucking enemy. Now, some of y'all just wish to just passively just walk through like nothing exists. Because you're so insulated from the bullshit, because you're so bombarded sensually by the luxuries of the world. The predisposed ideology by media and its distortion thereof that you're better than other countries in this world. And you're not. You're not. If this shit happened 100 years ago and they were trying to take it out of schools and they don't want you to properly be informed about it, and another community comes up that's 3 times more prosperous than that, and you don't know about the historical reference to when this takes place, you think that shit won't happen again to a greater extent? You don't think so? The moment you ever believe your enemy to be your savior for your salvation, you're fucked. You're fucked. And this is the reason why they want to take it out of school. They want to take it out of the mainstream education. They want to make you believe. That's why this whole shit with these so-called monuments are being taken down. It's not to convenience you. It's not to sit here and appease to public conscience. It's not to sit here and convince you that times have changed. It's to erase history. If you don't know the history of the country will immediately reset itself because it has to for its survival. But in order for it to do so, it needs the gullible, uninformed masses to do so. That's the truth. Take it into strict consideration, people. If this is your first time viewing this channel, like and subscribe. If this is also your first time viewing this content, hit the like button and subscribe button so you'll be properly informed. It is what it is. Peace, light, love. Take care. Gotta answer the door. It is what it is. And as far as agents, fuck you. Don't contact me.